marketing department. My role is varied, as is true for most people at a startup like Honor. I started out coming on board to really help develop the brand voice for Honor, and it was a bit tricky at first. We weren't quite sure how to talk to people about home care. And one of the questions that Cam asked me when I was first being interviewed is, well, how would you talk to these people? And I said very directly, very conversationally, very straightforward. We were talking about the adult children. And he said, but what about the care recipients? How would you talk to them? And I said, exactly the same way. So part of my role is actually translating what older people are actually like and what their needs are to some of the younger people on our staff. I also have a fun role of going out into the community, looking for interesting people to interview so that we can provide our clients resources, helpful information. Because if we're not out in the community really understanding what our people need and where they're getting their support, then we can't really do our job very well. So I'm now going to introduce our two panelists. We have Adriene Iverson, who's the president and CEO of Elder Care Alliance. That's a network of communities based here in the Bay Area. And Cy France, who is a physician and entrepreneur, the co-founder and CEO of WelbeHealth, which is a relatively new company that's providing physician house calls and also team-based, care support, trying to keep the medical costs down for older people. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit more fully to the audience.
Sure. Adriene Iverson from Elder Care Alliance. We have 5 senior living communities located here in the San Francisco Bay Area and 1 down in Ventura County. We, like Honor, are passionate about people, and we're passionate about older adults, serving older adults, and figuring out ways that we can help people successfully age in place. One of the kind of founding pillars to our vision statement is we strive to transform ourselves, the field of aging, and society's view and value of older adults. And then I always add, especially those with dementia. So we're passionate about serving people with dementia. Our newest community is in San Mateo, and I mention it because it's an age-restricted apartment building. And I think it allows us really to start to play with a lab. What services might we need to bring in to help people age in place more successfully, particularly at a lower socioeconomic level. So that's a little bit about Elder Care Alliance.
Great. So,
I don't think it is on. Yes.
there it is. So I'll tell you a little bit about my bio as well, and then the entrepreneurial story of Welby. Is that
right?
So I grew up in a small town in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. Literally all my extended family around. I knew 5 of my great-grandparents very well. I mean, had relationships with them, and they came to my birthday parties. I knew them well. I grew up in this environment where not only my grandparents, my great-grandparents were kind of thriving and contributing and part of my life and teaching. And so that was just kind of the world that I grew up in, kind of as a little seed that planted that kind of I think about looking back today. And then, I was fortunate enough, I was one of the first people in my family to go to college. I didn't know that many people who went to college, but I wanted to keep playing football. And so I went to college to play football. But much to my disappointment, I found that I was much better at school than I was at football, which was a huge surprise to me, actually, and a huge disappointment at the time. But it kind of sparked this interest in learning and continuing my education. And so, the idea of going to medical school wasn't present with me growing up, but I got very inspired, and I guess you could say I went to medical school with an open mind. And once again, I was fortunate to go to a medical school where there were lots of physicians who were agents of social change. One of my professors, Elliot Fisher, is a doctor he coined the phrase the accountable care organization, while I was there. Or Jim Weinstein was a spine surgeon who came out with a sport trial that showed that spinal surgery, in many cases, is no better than watchful waiting. Or they also did the research that showed, last 6 months of life in Los Angeles, you're more likely to spend twice as much, die in the ICU, and have worse clinical outcomes and worse satisfaction than, the Pacific Northwest or even Northern California. despite the same medical conditions. This kind of thinking was where I was, as an open-minded medical student, kind of, learning about the world and thinking about my role in it. And so I got very inspired to be kind of an agent of change. And so leapfrogging into my entrepreneurial career, the first company that I started was called WelbeHealth Urgent Care. And the idea for WelbeHealth, the idea for WelbeHealth was to build urgent care networks that were fully integrated with health systems, kind of like a front porch to the health system. And today, WelbeHealth is 600 employees, and it's in different markets across the country, but it's all part of a health system. Dignity in California, Northwell in New York State, which is the largest hospital system in New York State. We're in the Pacific Northwest with Legacy. And the whole idea was to create this a lot of things that Seth talked about, a very inspired team and workforce to deliver exceptional care. And so we had higher net promoter scores than Apple or Nordstrom. We were the first healthcare company to win the Retail Architecture Award. Just creating this great customer service. And so after selling that company around the same time I was selling that company to the buyout firm, I also jumped on my second entrepreneurial venture, which was becoming the chair of the board of it wasn't even a board at the time. This little startup in New Hampshire that was doing group-based opiate addiction therapy. And if you read the newspaper, and everybody here has some affiliation with healthcare, opiate addiction, whether it's heroin or narcotic pain medication, huge epidemic across the country. And there was a young doctor there who had started a group-based model. So doing a group-based model for this type of treatment reduced the physician costs because the physician availability is the bottleneck to Suboxone therapy. Reduced the physician costs by 90 to 95%, which allowed it to have much lower break-even points. So he's expanding in rural markets across the country, rural group-based opiate addiction centers, and helped that company get several rounds of financing and build out a team, and just kind of continuing on my entrepreneurial journey. And so I got to a point about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. My co-founder he's a chief medical officer for a large home health and hospice company. And we just went on a jog around the Stanford campus and started brainstorming, should we start another company? And the question we said is, if we're going to start another company, what's the one problem we'd solve? I mean, if you were to say, if you knew you could address a problem in even a small way, what's the one problem that's worth going after with an entrepreneurial background? That's the one problem. We said, well, what if we could serve the most frail, vulnerable members of our society with better quality and compassion in a pure value-based reimbursement model? Because value-based reimbursement model, all the incentives are aligned. Serve the most frail, vulnerable people in society with better quality and compassion in a way where all the incentives were aligned to do a good job. It's like, gosh, I don't know how we do that, but if we can do that, if we can even attempt to do that, that's worth trying. And so that's whenever we launched this company called WelbeHealth, which fortunately, shortly thereafter, we saw that we heard that the PACE regulations had changed to allow for-profit organizations to apply for PACE licenses. And I've known about PACE. I've known about PACE for several years and always thought it was the best model in healthcare. I mean, if we were all going to design the healthcare system from scratch, we would need all these different services. But the fact that we're in the healthcare system we're in, I think PACE is like the most important model, the most important problem to solve in the industrialized world is the problem that PACE solved. And so we decided to launch a company that would just go bring PACE to more populations. And so that's kind of what WelbeHealth does now.
Thank you, Sai. Can I just ask you to tell people who may not be familiar with the PACE program, what that is, and how WelbeHealth is working with them?
Absolutely. So who needs a PACE tutorial? Just want to make sure. Only 10% of people? Most people know. Who knows what PACE is really well? Okay. About 10% of the people. 80% non-participating. So no, I understand. That's fine. So PACE is a comprehensive program. It's called the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. And PACE has been around for 40 years. Started in San Francisco. It was called Unlock, and it was to serve the Chinese American community in San Francisco who didn't want to institutionalize their elders. Just like we didn't do in Wenatchee, Washington, when I was growing up. And It took about 15 years before CMS said, well, that works in the Chinese American community in San Francisco. Let's see if we can replicate it across the country. So 25 years ago, there was a few replication sites. To be a patient in PACE, you need to meet 3 criteria. Poor enough for Medicaid, old enough for Medicare, and sick enough to be nursing home eligible. Poor enough for Medicaid, old enough for Medicare, sick enough to be nursing home eligible. So these are patients that qualify by the state to live full-time, round-the-clock with 24/7 nursing coverage. That's how sick these patients are. So 4.5-year life expectancy, over half have at least mild dementia, 8 chronic medical conditions, 2 to 3 challenges of daily living, we call them activities of daily living, or ADLs, which is like cooking, cleaning, bathing, personal hygiene, 2 to 3 of those challenges. And this is a very frail population. And yet they don't live in a nursing home. They live in the community. They live in sometimes assisted living. Typically they live in son or daughter's back bedroom. And what PACE does is PACE provides all the services they need to thrive and do well in that environment and avoid being institutionalized. And so that's
Great, thank you. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about community. So we're seeing the definition of home is changing for many people. Adriene, your company has created a variety of types of communities for older adults. Your company is actually taking medical care into the communities. How do you see communities changing for older people, and what types of creative partnerships are being developed?
I think for us, one of the things that I'm really interested in solving is how do we serve the 80%? So 10% of people roughly are served by affordable housing. They qualify for affordable housing. Roughly 10% of people can afford senior living, assisted living, or memory care services. So how do you serve the 80% that sit in the middle? And certainly honor plays a big role in that. And as I mentioned previously, that's one of the reasons why we're so interested in our newest property, because I think it gives us this opportunity to really think about what is it to age well. Even in our own organization, we're having the wrong conversation. We're talking about where people are living. We're not talking about quality of life. And that's really the more important question. Oftentimes we hear people move into our communities and they say, gosh, I wish I would have done this 3 years or 4 years ago. But as the case manager stated in the question at the end of the last session, it's a difficult conversation for people to have because there's so much other emotion tied up into loss of independence, insecurity, and all of that. But if we center the conversation around quality of life, then we can really think about what do you need to age in place successfully. I mean, loneliness has been shown to be a larger risk factor than smoking. Yet we're not really talking about how people have become isolated in their home, which doesn't mean that they have to move out of their home, but it does mean how do we need to serve them differently to ensure that they aren't isolated and can still connect to the wider neighborhood and community within which they live. So one of the concepts that I've been, I heard back in January that I've been kind of germinating on is community quarterback. And it's how do you move from being an organization that's a participant in maybe a community coalition to solve a problem, whether that's informal or formal, to being the driving force. And to being the driving force to create socially cohesive communities that contain all the services that that particular community needs to age in place well. And so as I think about who we are today and where we might morph, that's really a role I think about a lot, particularly since we have a passion for creating dementia-inclusive communities that eliminate a lot of the isolation that can happen for people with dementia, particularly who are aging in place in their homes.
Same question, Sai. What's your sense of community and how that's changing for the people that you're providing medical care to?
Well, the way that it's interesting, so our vision statement, those mission, vision, values that companies say, our vision statement of company, what's the world we want to help be a part of creating over 20, 30 horizon. It's a world where everybody can participate, where our seniors can participate in their communities until through their last days of life. They can actively participate, thrive in that community. What that means to us is that they're contributing. And people especially the population that we're all here and passionate to serve, have so much to contribute. And just the same way that my great-grandparents contributed to me, in today's society, when people live all over the place and there's kind of a bias toward institutionalizing people, when they're in their final years, we try to think, well, how can you avoid that, allow them to live in the community where they want to live, but not only that, but give them the health, give them the social services that they need so they can keep contributing, whether it's writing, teaching, being involved in the lives of a family member, whether that's in person or whether that's remote, if they live across the country. I mean, these are just try to find ways where they can keep interacting and contributing, participating, and contributing also.
I'm hearing from you two definitely, and other people as well, more of the idea of holistic health, that you have to really look at the full package, the social component as well as the physical and the medical component. And Adriene, I know that you have some programs for healthy aging at Elder Care Alliance. Do you want to talk about any of those? I was particularly intrigued by the intergenerational experiences. So you're bringing in even young children to interact with some of your residents?
Yeah, and I think it's the two-way, right? So it's not just the intergenerational engagement, bringing it in, but it's also how are we connecting to the broader neighborhood? Because so often, admittedly, we've served as these little oases, right, that are self-contained. And we need to be more of a participant in the neighborhoods and the community. So a couple cool things I'll mention. One of our life enrichment directors had a music program in one of our memory care neighborhoods, and she worked overtime with the residents to write songs. And then we have a relationship with an elementary school down the street. They were interested in performing those songs, so they learned the music, and then they came and they performed for the whole community, including our memory care residents. So it was this really great way of connecting the two, but also, again, starting to change the view that those kids might have of who people are with dementia. Another great event that I'm still a little bit on a high from, we worked with the Alzheimer's Association to create a dementia-inclusive movie program that we held at the Vogue in San Francisco, and thank you to the folks from Honor who helped volunteer at the event. And it was amazing, because I think everyone who attended, from the volunteers to the care staff who were there to people from the neighborhood, loved the event and would go again. And even the general manager of the movie theater and the projectionist, I think there hadn't been that kind of buzz in that movie theater. Over 180 people attending a screening in a long time. And just in conversations as people left, and in conversations with people in the neighborhood who were asking what was going on, you start to see this glimmer of creating access to culture, arts in the broader neighborhood that was dementia inclusive, where we didn't see the person as the diagnosis, but we saw the person as a member of the community.
I love that you have your program for memory care is, I think it's called I'm Still Here, which is something that I think we always need to be reminded of, that even as someone's cognition declines, as their illness progresses, the person that you know and love is still inside, often hearing and seeing what's going on around them. Let's talk a little bit about inspiration and influencers. Where do you look for new ideas? Whose work do you admire? Who should we be reading about and following?
For us, well, so for WellBe, our most influential role models, like I see as a company, is just the existing PACE community. So all of you who raise your hand and are familiar with PACE, PACE is an amazing care model. But there's only 120 PACE programs in the whole country.
Didn't they just open it up about 2 years ago to for-profit businesses? I think that's one of the changes.
Yeah, that's about a year and a half ago. Yeah. So we're kind of the first kind of venture-backed company in PACE. There was a buyout firm that came in and got involved in PACE as well. So it's kind of two for-profit companies in PACE right now. But if we look at how do we want to build an organization, you don't have to look too much further than the others in the PACE community. It's because PACE has been around like I said earlier, for 40 years, the best practices are shared. Everybody in the organization is serving the same mission around trying to serve the same population in different parts of the country. So we're all working together for that same cause. And if you want to, understand how to run a PACE organization, how to create and how to run a PACE organization, you can look no further than the models that they've adopted. And then, the hard part for us is just trying to bridge the gap between, in a nonprofit world of PACE, pretty much self-selects from mission-driven people. So you're going to have mission-driven, inspired people, at least entering that industry. And so for us, how do we create kind of an entrepreneurial company that taps into that same mission? That's where we're just so disciplined around mission first. Mission is the only thing we even think about or talk about. We know if we do a good job of that, all the other things will take care of itself. But that's what we get our inspiration from. And then the only kind of things that we need to kind of bridge.
Do you look at companies overseas, different models, international? Because there's some very interesting things going on, especially with memory care in the Netherlands that I'm sure most of you are probably aware of, but entire communities that are designed specifically for people with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. It's really, really interesting that they're able to create that full small town experience, but with an exterior boundary that keeps people safe. Do you look elsewhere, Adriene, for inspiration?
Absolutely, and especially outside senior living, because I find sometimes that can be really insular, the thinking. I will say, I think the Dementia Village in the Netherlands is really interesting. Personally, the issue I have with it is we're still taking everybody with dementia and putting them together in one place. And I am really passionate about how do we create communities and neighborhoods that are dementia inclusive and still keep people safe. And it's easier at certain stages of the disease, obviously. But I think from an economic perspective, but also from a contribution perspective, I think Sai spoke to that earlier. I think one of the most amazing things is there's so much wisdom and contribution as you speak to people with dementia that we can't miss. How do we continue to tap into that?
Sort of leads into another question that I wanted to ask you both about space. And Sai, your previous company won an architecture award for the design. Obviously, you guys put a lot of thought into that and made designing the space a priority. Can you talk a little bit about why that was a priority for an urgent care company?
Well, urgent care, the role of the environment kind of speaks for itself, like why that's important, because that's where people are going.
But if you tell people a little bit about some of the details, like the glass enclosed sort of.
Oh, sure.
Just so people who haven't seen it understand.
Yeah. So this is with the GoHealth urgent care. So at GoHealth, what we did is try to take the best of retail concepts. So, I think one of the most amazing retail experiences that I have is, when you drive down at night past an Apple store, you can't help but look inside. It's like an aquarium, almost. And so we said, well, wow, that's pretty captivating. So 70% of urgent care, when we were just starting that GoHealth, 70% of urgent care visits were drive-by. People who knew, I know where it is because I've driven by it before. So when I get sick, I know where the center is because I've driven by it 100 times. So we needed to create that kind of Apple store environment. Like I know where all the Apple stores are if I drive by them at night because it just visually draws you in. So we try to create that. And then they say, well, what do you want them to see when you look in? And one of the problems that is out there today is like knowing the credibility of urgent. So one of the things we do with urgent care is we partner with them all with hospitals. And so if you see one of our urgent care centers in San Francisco, it's just Dignity Health all over it. So that's one credibility thing. The second credibility thing is, well, what can they do in there? Is it like an ER or is it like a retail clinic, kind of in the back of a drugstore? And so we also have inside the clinic a glass showing the procedure rooms. So you can see the ER stretcher, the crash cart, all that you can actually see from the street. So when you get that Apple Store experience, you can look in and see that high intensity room. But then, you can frost over the glass. It's not expensive to get, the glass. You push the button and all of a sudden it's opaque. So you have that. But you can see, you're driving down through Queens, New York, and you can see the thing from all the way across. You can see the crash carts and everything all the way across the street at night. It's done in a tasteful way, but in a very soothing environment, but from the other side of the street that there's serious business that can happen.
Yeah, and it looks like a space where you actually want to be. Lots of round edges and natural materials, and it's very unusual compared to most emergency room settings or other urgent care.
Yeah, and there's research done on how there can be a healing effect of the space you're in if you're sick. So we wanted to tap into that. And then also with PACE, we're building our first PACE program in Stockton, California. And for those of you familiar with Stockton, the community, it's an interesting community that has its own unique sets of challenges and opportunities. And so we wanted to create a PACE center. So the PACE model is more like a payer. It's more like a Medicare Advantage plan, but a duals plan, kind of functionally and legally. But there is a center that you bring people to every day where they have primary care and hygiene and meals, and there's a day center and activities. We wanted to create that center, and that's typically where people tour when they first see the facility. We wanted to create a center that was immediately that felt welcoming. If you're bringing a frail, elderly relative there, immediately it'd be welcoming. And so we just had to we just went back to the brainstorming. What are we trying to achieve? So our PACE center actually is the facility looks nothing like any PACE center you would ever walk in. It actually looks more like a grand hotel, a huge lobby. When you walk in a hotel, there's not like most medical offices. There's not a front room with these locked doors, and you have to push a button and open it up and sit down and wait for someone to sign you in. But when you walk in a nice hotel, you can automatically kind of see out the back windows into the ocean. So we're not next to an ocean. We're next to a pond. And we wanted to create that kind of grand lodge, kind of grand area where that's the day room. It's like an inviting place people would want to stay and feel comforted and soothed, and then all the different facilities are kind of off that grand day room, like a marketplace kind of feel, like a mall kind of feel. It doesn't look like a mall, but it's this beautiful room with these stores kind of off to the side. It's the primary care clinic, the physical therapy center, the personal hygiene, and we call it the salon because you get your hair done and nails done there. So.
Great. Adrienne, you were telling me a little bit about one of your newest properties that sounds like it's different in a number of ways from some of your more established communities. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that and what makes it different?
Yeah, so I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's in San Mateo. It's called the Villa at San Mateo, and it's actually a hotel conversion. So it was a hotel, and that was converted to an age-restricted apartment building. And it's got a small retail strip on one side, and it's got a restaurant up front. That's all part of the property. And then it's got a ton of banquet space, actually, which right now about half of it is resident amenity space. And we've done some things like we added a spiritual care director / concierge, which is kind of an interesting mix of a position that will help both add services. So, for instance, we just added a meditation room, and he's doing a meditation class a couple times a week, but also will help start to connect people to services and get a lot more information about what is it that causes people to move out, particularly to a higher care setting. And what might we do to connect them to services to help them age in place well longer? And then what can we learn from that in terms of taking what we do in our own communities and extending out into the broader community to help people age in place in their homes? So we're excited about that, as well as looking at the unused banquet space and how that might become kind of a community benefit, and how do we invite organizations from the broader community in to utilize that space for the benefit of our residents as well as for the benefit of the wider neighborhood.
The retail spaces, have you or will you be filling them with companies that are selling services or products specifically for older people?
Well, actually, it's interesting. So we've got a pet store. We've got 2 beauty salons. I'm not sure why we have 2 beauty salons, but we have 2 beauty salons.
I think I know why.
We have a tutoring center and then an insurance company. So yes, over time we're looking at both those retail spaces as well as the unused space that we have to say, how do we bring services in? So do we need to bring podiatry in? Do we need to bring PT and OT in? Are there other services that we can invite in for the benefit of our residents? So we're certainly looking at that, and we've been working with the restaurant. We're going to be doing actually dementia training for the staff in the restaurant And then the restaurant actually now is doing meal delivery for our residents. So we're looking at ways to leverage the businesses that are on the property and nearby.
That's great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And just so you know, we're going to run a little bit past 12 noon, which was our scheduled end time. So we were talking earlier about perceptions, or more importantly, misperceptions about moving out of your home into assisted living and what that really means for your life. So, and also, Sai, this is for you as well. With innovation, how do you raise awareness? How do you let the general public know what you're doing and what new services are available? And Adrienne, how do you address people's, emotional sort of barriers to moving out of their home? And are there guidelines that you help people, that you use to help people decide when it's the right time to move from their home into assisted living?
For us, we're not good at that conversation right now. Again, we have to move that conversation more to what is quality of life for you. And we may not be the best place for you. But if we are, hopefully it's because we've had this more in-depth conversation with you, not about apartment size. And you get 3 meals a day, and by the way, there's housekeeping. But really, what is it? Why are we having the conversation in the first place? And what is it that we can offer? And one of the things from a life enrichment programming perspective that we're really focused on now is something that Sai touched on earlier, which is connecting people to purpose. And so how do we ensure that our life enrichment programming just isn't about bingo and making sure we filled the schedule and we've got the movie at 3 o'clock, but that it is really a platform that people connect to those things that they're passionate about. And the vision that I've set for my team is, wouldn't it be awesome if that our transportation wasn't just for medical appointments and shopping, but that at least one day a week it was dropping people off at their volunteer opportunities. That's really what I'd love to see, so that we have communities of purpose, that people are really engaged and empowered. And certainly in our memory care neighborhoods, there's a lot of community connection happening. They're choosing community service projects that they are interested in supporting. But how do we get that through all of our communities? And again, become not just these little islands within a neighborhood, but that we're really members and contributing members of the broader neighborhood.
So it's inspiring examples. I'm taking mental notes. Those are great.
Yeah.
So your question is, how do you educate people about
How do you raise awareness?
care?
Yeah. How do you educate them? How do you let them know? Yeah.
Well, I think it's 2 ways: tactical, and then there's what's the message. I mean, PACE has very clear kind of tactical ways that you do outreach, just because it's regulated like a payer, and so how you reach out to referral sources and things like that. The message that we want to have for patients and the decision makers about whether patients are going to enroll in the PACE program, I think, is trying to just connect with them about, because people don't know what PACE is. I mean, we're all in the industry, and a lot of people here don't know what PACE is, and it's really been kind of it's kind of like hospice was before, 15 years ago, before there was a big growth in it. People didn't really know what it was, and actually some people were kind of scared of it. And as a services physician, I think it's like one of the great successes of healthcare over the past few decades is the growth of the availability of hospice for people who need it. So, how do you reach them, and what's the messaging? I think the messaging is something that you try to tap into, something everybody can relate to. All of us, because of our work, can probably relate to it professionally, but we can also relate to it personally, having someone we love or know who's in a very vulnerable position, and you're the role of the coordinator, and they're trying to discharge you, but they're trying to discharge someone. You don't know where they're going to be discharged. You don't know if the doctors are talking to each other, or if anybody even read this morning's lab report, and the DME service isn't answering the phone, and you don't know if the bed's going to. It's in the most vulnerable time for the most vulnerable patients. It's this absolutely horrible and unconscionable situation for our society to put people in. And what if there was an organization that just took care of all of it? Enroll them in the PACE program. We do everything. Our job is to help them thrive in the community, provide 24/7 resources, provide all the social, all the medical, full interdisciplinary care that they need, everything they need. So we just take that burden off your hands. So that's the message that we're trying to communicate to in PACE we call them participants, not just patients. The term PACE participants. That's the message we're trying to communicate to participants and their families.
Thank you. Love to open this up to questions on the floor. Yes.
So wow, there's so much I want to talk to you guys about. So the term, first of all, thank you very much both for what you're doing. You're so needed, and I really appreciate what you've taught me today. Those questions about helping people find the appropriate community. This is a place where the internet is not your friend. You really need a local specialist, a person who specializes in placement. For some people, being at home is not an option, or the best option. And it really takes someone who knows these communities inside and out, and which would be the best fit based on the needs and the personality and a lot of different factors. There are placement specialists, so just please don't fill out a form online for that. It's not going to be your friend. So anyway, I just wanted to plug into that. But I wanted to ask you, Adriene, one of the issues that we're seeing is the folks who have the so-called behaviors. And we go in good communities, we go in and we try to see, is it the meds, is it a certain time of day, or the ways we can train the caregiver. We do a lot to try to support the person who's having those behaviors, especially when they're dangerous to other residents or the staff. But again and again, we're seeing people getting kicked out. And then they go somewhere new and they get kicked out. And then they got a label and it's really hard to get them placed. What are you guys doing with your folks like that?
One of the things when we implemented the I'm Still Here philosophy, which is Dr. John Zeisel wrote a book of that name, one of the key tenets is parallel programming. And so it's really looking at early, mid, and late stages in the disease process and actually designing programming specific for those stages, and that you'd have parallel programming happening at one time. So you don't have everybody going to the same group. So we found that actually has reduced behaviors pretty significantly. Now, we know that there's going to be cases where the manifestation of the disease process is behaviors. And in many cases, we can handle that. I'll be honest, in some cases, we'll refer them to somebody like, for instance, a Silverado, who's got a medical director, social worker, all of that. I know, I see the face. I know, I see the face. It's challenging. I mean, I had this conversation actually with a woman about 9 months ago and her husband, and so we talked about it. One of the organizations I'll kind of give a plug to is Sage Elder in San Francisco. One of the things I love is they'll come in and they'll work one-on-one with the client around life engagement strategies, because I think a lot of times that's what it is. I mean, yes, medication has a place, but part of it is starting to do a little of that investigative work about their life history, what did they do, and what might be causing some of those behaviors aside from the disease, and are there actually life enrichment or life engagement strategies that can help mitigate that. So that's one of the other pieces that we've done, either bringing in a doctor for a consult, or sometimes we'll bring in Sage Elder to help if there's a specific individual with behaviors that we haven't been able to mitigate.
There were a few communities that were taking the places, and most places will work with them like that, and they're still having they may reduce it by 98%, but 2% of the time they're walking up and hitting other residents. Mm-hmm. And it's those people that there's nowhere for them to go. There's one place in Antioch that will take them, but unless that's really the only one I know, right? Places just continue to just say there's a certain amount of this population, even really good places. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
So just to kind of add on to that, coming from a case management background in a large academic center, I get so excited hearing about all of these resources, but then also realize the realities of trying to access them. What we're seeing often are patients that are brought into the hospital at a point in which their families can no longer care for them, and these are resources that they didn't have at a time when they maybe needed them, not for years ahead of time. So I'm interested to
You hit on a topic that's near and dear to our heart. Is how do you? Because there are patients who are discharged, who are just in the hospital, discharged, and that's a time whenever they start getting interested in PACE, whenever they could know about it earlier and qualify for it much earlier. And actually, any patient who qualifies, almost very, very high percentage of people who qualify for it and learn about it fall in love with the model. So I agree. It's just getting out and meeting with different referral channels in the community, education channels in the community. That's one of the keys. And I think one of the hard parts historically about PACE is that there's a perception that that when a patient enrolls in the PACE program, they have to give up their primary care doctor. And there are some technicalities around that because now the PACE program needs to become the primary care doctor of record. But it doesn't mean they need to give up that relationship per se in the way that it's historically done. It's just kind of one example of an easy solution. It's the single biggest reason why a qualified PACE participant or their family member decline entries. They don't have to give up their doctor. Well, what if they didn't have to give up their doctor? I mean, there's kind of different ways that you can start modifying the model to make it much more palatable for early, for people who are earlier in their progression.
Do you have a sense of what's available now as far as accessing those programs? Because we know about them, but we aren't ever able to actually get patients into them because they're full or they're some of the limitations that they talked about, the misperceptions that people have. And so we're kind of patching together, band-aiding things and services to try and buy time because we're catching people at that point, at that really low point.
You're finding that that the programs are full, or that they don't qualify, or that they decline it, or all three of them. Well, if they're full, I mean that's part of the reason for opening up PACE to new types of PACE organizations and to growing the model. So that hopefully will get solved over time, because patchworking, the resources PACE provides, patchworking that together is like nearly impossible, because PACE is actually the full. They're responsible for the total cost of care, long-term care and medical care. So that all happens in the most coordinated way. It's like by definition the most coordinated incentives possible within the constraints of the U.S. healthcare system. So that one's there. If they're not qualified for PACE, there's not a lot that can be done other than PACE programs can start opening up the programs outside of Medicaid eligibles. That has historically not been offered to the extent it could, because families would willingly subsidize some of that cost. Certainly a lot less expensive than the alternatives. And so if you could crack that one, that'd be a third kind of, hopefully that'll happen in the future. And if the patient declines, we've already kind of talked about the biggest reason they decline is primary care doctors. So I don't know, that doesn't solve your problem immediately, but hopefully PACE programs over time can start solving them.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you to both of you. We'll now be breaking for lunch.